it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Tonight's story, by Augustus Cordoba, follows Dr. Kirk Schneider, a scientist drawn to the icy desolation of Antarctica by whispers of an abandoned NASA facility known only as Station Zero. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, something went very wrong there. What began as research into dark matter turned into something far more disturbing, an experiment that may have opened a door that was never meant to be opened. As Schneider digs deeper, he uncovers chilling testimonies from those who survived the project, and learns that some knowledge doesn't just destroy the mind, it devours it. I investigated NASA's abandoned Antarctic base. What I found should have remained undisturbed. By Augustus Cordoba. Part 1. The wind outside my window screamed and howled like something dying, rattling the glass while I stared at the mess of papers spread across my desk. Name's Dr. Kirk Schneider, and for 15 long years I've buried myself in the shadows of science, chasing after the kind of mysteries no sane man wants to find. Phenomena tied to space programs, secrets hidden under layers of government lies. But none of it, none of the launches, the sealed reports, the whispers about black projects, none of it prepared me for what I stumbled across in the Antarctic. It started the way these things usually do. Requests filed under the Freedom of Information Act, clawing at the locked doors of NASA's past. Dark matter research from the early 2000s. Most of what came back was butchered by censors, whole pages drowned in black ink, or worse, flat-out denials. But one scrap slipped through, just one. A document too ordinary to draw attention, but too strange to ignore. It spoke of something called Project Mykonos, a site buried in the Antarctic wasteland. Station Zero. No trace of it in NASA's official records, yet the document listed heavy funding, shipments of equipment, personnel shuttled south to nowhere, and then silence. By 2004, the trail just stopped. No closure reports, no transfers, no shutdown paperwork. The whole thing had been cut from history like it never existed. The first crack in the wall came when I found Scott Walder, maintenance worker, one of the few still breathing who'd served at Station Zero. He lived alone in a cramped Alaskan apartment, curtains drawn tight. When I knocked, he looked like a man already half dead, skin grey, hands trembling as he poured burnt coffee into chipped mugs. Should have been in his 60s, but looked closer to 80, eyes hollowed out, haunted by whatever he'd left behind. That place, it wasn't right, he muttered, staring into the swirl of his drink like it might swallow him whole. Started clean enough. New walls, sharp people, good work. His voice cracked. But then, it changed. It started slow, almost invisible, he said. A flicker in the machines, gear that worked one day and died the next. Strange noises slipping through the ventilation shafts, like whispers dragging down steel corridors. Then came the dreams, he said. Not ordinary nightmares, the kind that leave you sweating for a minute but fade with daylight. No, these were worse. People woke up shaking, hollow-eyed, terrified to even close their lids again. Walter's voice cracked when he talked about the last days before they pulled the plug on the place. Scientists, they, found something, he said, knuckles white around his cup. Something they never should have touched. He admitted he didn't follow half their jargon, but he'd seen it plain as day. They were scared, broken. One morning, making his rounds, he checked the heating system in the main lab. That's when he heard Dr. Erasmus, the one in charge, curled up in a corner like a child, sobbing into her hands. She kept mumbling the same broken phrases. Signals. The other side of the signals. He shuddered at the memory, and swallowed half his coffee like he was trying to drown the thought. 3 days after that, it was over. The order came down hard and fast, everyone out within the hour. No reason given, no explanations. Just pack what you could carry and leave the rest to rot. Equipment, research, personal belongings, abandoned. No one ever went back. I pushed him, tried to drag more out of him, but Walder only shook his head, eyes gone flat. That's all I can give you. All anyone should want to know. If you're smart, Schneider, you'll bury this. Some doors stay shut for a reason. But I wasn't smart. Couldn't drop it. Station Zero hooked into my veins like a drug. I spent months tearing through scraps of intel, chasing dead-end paper trails, cornering anyone who might have brushed against Project Mykonos. Most of them slammed the door in my face. Each rejection, though, only made me hungrier. Then came the crack in the wall, the lead I'd been bleeding for. Former NASA administrator finally gave me what I needed, a name and a location. Dr. Elena Erasmus, the project's lead scientist. Tracking her down wasn't easy. Weeks of calls unanswered, letters ignored. But persistence eats through walls, and at last she relented, offering me a meeting. Her place was a cabin deep in the Cascade Mountains, far from anyone who might listen. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. Yeah, the woman in those old project photos had been sharp, confident, eyes burning with brilliance. The figure standing before me was a husk of that person, haunted, hollowed out, shadows carved deep into her face. Her hair was snow white now, not from age alone, but from years of pressure and sleepless nights. Deep trenches of worry carved her face, each line a map of something she'd endured and couldn't forget. The inside of the cabin looked like a war zone of obsession. Papers stacked in uneven towers, star charts pinned to the walls, flickering monitors scrolling endless streams of atmospheric data. "I know why you're here," she said, before I could even open my mouth. Her voice was low but steady, like someone reciting a confession she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "You want to know about Station Zero, and what we found there." She moved to the window, staring out at the jagged snow-cloaked peaks like they were prison bars. "I've spent years trying to erase it, convincing myself it was some fever dream," she whispered. "But it was real. God help me, it was real." When Dr. Erasmus turned back to me, her eyes weren't the eyes of a scientist anymore. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen the edge of the world and come back changed. Fear mixed with resignation in her gaze. "We thought we were pioneers," she said, "pushing into the unknown for humanity's sake. We were so proud of our work, so sure of our methods. We were children, blind children, playing with, well, not fire, something worse than fire, something alive." She crossed the room to a locked cabinet, her hands trembling like they no longer belonged to her. From inside, she pulled a small metal box, dull and scarred, like it had survived 100 disasters. She placed it on the table and opened it with a shaking key. Inside lay a keycard and a slip of paper scrawled with coordinates. "These'll get you in," she said, voice cracking, "if you're foolish enough to go. But listen to me. If you walk through those doors, your life as you know it is over. Some knowledge rewires you, some truths eat you from the inside. Some things, well, they're better left buried in the ice." I tried pressing her, pushing her for more. Her answers grew jagged, frantic. Her eyes darted to the corners of the cabin as if the shadows themselves were listening. "Hey, they're watching," she hissed under her breath. "They've always been watching, since that day, since we made contact." And that was all I could pry out of her. But the next morning she was gone, vanished without a trace. The cabin stood silent, cold, her equipment still humming, still tracking something out there in the sky. And despite every warning, every red flag, I couldn't stop. The coordinates burned in my hands, pointing to a frozen no-man's land far within the Antarctic Circle, one of the most desolate regions on Earth. I spent weeks preparing, knowing full well I was walking into the jaws of something I didn't understand. I gathered what I would need for the descent into hell. Cold weather gear built for sub-zero punishment. Satellite phones, enough rations and fuel to last a month. Every item felt like a shield to me, but I knew none of them would save me if things went wrong. The further south I pushed, the more it felt like I was traveling backward through time, leaving the modern world behind mile by mile. My chartered bush plane cut across a wasteland of endless white, the horizon devoured by ice and storm. Still, I couldn't shake it, the sense that I wasn't the one doing the hunting. I was being pulled forward, every step of my investigation manipulated by something waiting for me at the edge of the world. Something ancient, something patient. When the coordinates finally appeared beneath the plane's nose, I realized I was heading into more than just frozen wilderness. I was descending into something that had been buried on purpose. The horrors tied to Station Zero would be worse than anything my imagination had prepared me for, and the cost of finding out would gut me deeper than I was ready to admit. The first glimpse came through a break in the whiteout. First it looked like a mirage, some trick of the storm, but no, it was real. A structure rising out of the ice, half swallowed by drifts, wrong against the landscape. The pilot circled once, his jaw tight as he scanned the makeshift landing zone I'd marked on satellite images. "Well, that's as close as I can get you," he bellowed over the engines, eyes locked dead ahead. "Weather's turning. You got 1 hour, then I leave, with or without you." No, I didn't argue. He meant it. The radar had already shown a massive system rolling in, and in the Antarctic, you don't gamble with storms. You respected them, or you died in them. The second my boots hit the snow, the cold punched the air out of my lungs. The pilot moved fast, unloading my gear with a kind of mechanical precision, his coat snapping in the wind. The ice screamed across the tundra, cutting every breath short, turning even simple movements into battles. "Hey, remember," he shouted, voice half swallowed by the storm. "Satellite phone won't work inside. Get in trouble, you drag yourself outside and call. I'll come back when it clears." And then he was gone. The roar of the engines lifted away into the blizzard, swallowed whole by the Antarctic's endless howl. And in seconds, I was alone. Standing alone in front of Station Zero, I felt it crawl all over me. That heavy, bone-deep sense of wrongness you can't explain, only endure. Professional curiosity might have carried me this far, but it wasn't strong enough to drown out the instinct screaming at me to turn back. The facility stretched across the ice like some alien wreck, its geometry brutal and alien against the horizon. Black walls jutted from the endless snow, untouched by time or storm. No cracks, no claps, no scars from the Antarctic's 2 decades of fury. It was immaculate, too immaculate, like it hadn't endured the years at all, only waited. Dr. Erasmus's files had been exact. The main entrance stood at the far end of a low structure that passed for an administration building. A reinforced airlock sealed the way forward. My fingers hesitated, card in hand, before I slid it through the reader. The light blinked green. It was too clean, too normal. A sound followed, the mechanical grind of bolts pulling back, the hiss of pressure equalizing, and then the door gave way. Inside, the silence hit me harder than the cold. After hours of wind howling like a living thing outside, the stillness was suffocating. It pressed in, thick, as if the air itself was heavy. Emergency lights pulsed faint blue along the corridors, their glow washing the place in sickly color. Backup power systems, still alive after all these years. The air carried a sharp metallic tang, cut with something I couldn't place, something stale and alien that coated the back of my throat. My boots thudded against the linoleum, each step echoing down the deserted halls that seemed to stretch forever. The administration wing was frozen in time. Desks littered with papers, coffee cups, half drained, ringed with mold. Computers still humming in sleep mode, screens waiting for hands that would never touch them again. They didn't feel abandoned. No, it felt interrupted, like everyone had just vanished mid-sentence. I forced myself onward, finding the security office. A bank of monitors still hummed with life, flickering weakly. One by one, I scanned through the feeds. endless corridors, labs choked with silence, rooms as still as graves. And I saw it. One feed that didn't look like the others. The timestamp on the screen matched the current hour, but there was something off about the image. Static crawled along the edges, like the feed itself was breathing. I leaned in closer, trying to make sense of it. The camera showed what looked like a break room, tables, chairs, a vending machine frozen mid-hum. For a heartbeat, I could have sworn someone was sitting at one of the tables, head bent low, unmoving. I blinked and leaned in again. Empty. Well, the chair was there, but no one in it. Well, the schematics I'd studied hadn't lied. Station Zero was massive, a labyrinth stacked both above and below the surface. The deeper sections were marked as research zones, while the upper levels were laid out like a self-contained world. Living quarters, recreation rooms, support services. According to Erasmus's documents, it was built to hold 50 people indefinitely. As I pushed deeper into the living quarters, the reality of its sudden abandonment clawed at me. Family photos still pinned to walls, drawers still filled with neatly folded clothes, books left open on nightstands as if someone had sat down just for a second. Time here hadn't moved on. It had stopped. In one room I found a journal, a battered spiral-bound notebook belonging to one of the researchers. The last entry made my stomach knot. The dreams are worse. Everyone's having them now. Harris says it's stress, isolation playing tricks on our heads. But how do we all have the same dream? The same voice calling from behind the mirror, whispering in the dark. Dr. Erasmus knows something. I see it in her face at the morning briefings. Whatever they found in the lower labs, it's changing things. It's changing us. Well, after that, nothing. Just blank pages. But the handwriting in that final entry wasn't right. Letters were jagged, words wobbling off the lines, like the writer's hand had been shaking. Like something else had crept in mid-sentence. I slid the journal into my pack, feeling the weight of it like a stone. It might be the only clue left. The further I moved into the belly of Station Zero, the more I noticed it. Subtle shifts, a wrongness creeping into the air, into the walls themselves, like the place was no longer empty, but watching. And the deeper I went, the colder it got. Not the kind of cold you measure. This was a cold that crept under your skin, ignoring whatever the thermal readout said. The emergency lights had changed too. Their glow shifted from pale blue to something murkier, shadows stretching in ways that didn't match the angles of the walls. They moved on their own, like they had their own pulse. Oh, and there was something else, a weight pressing down on me, the unmistakable sense of being watched. Not just observed, but studied. Each step I took made it stronger, like I was walking deeper into the gaze of something I couldn't see. The research levels were sealed behind a reinforced elevator system. Erasmus's keycard still worked, its worn edges slick with my gloves as I slid it through. The lock clunked open with an ugly metallic sound, and I stepped inside. As the elevator dropped, my ears popped violently. It felt like diving into black water, pressure closing in from all sides. The display flickered. B1, B2, and then numbers I didn't recognize, levels not on any schematic I'd studied. Down and down we went, into a place no one had mapped. When the doors finally parted, I stepped out into a cavernous circular hub. The scale of it was staggering. Massive windows ringed the chamber, looking into laboratories built for every facet of whatever nightmare Project Mykonos had unleashed. Each lab was empty, lifeless, but their glass panes gleamed like eyes. It was the center of the hub that froze my blood, though. A machine, huge, sprawling, stood there like a monolith. It looked like a particle detector, but just wrong. Not built by the logic of human hands. Angles that shouldn't exist, curves that bent light the wrong way, engineering that defied every principle I knew. And then, in the dark glass of an observation window, I saw it. Not just a reflection, not just my face. For a split second, I saw myself, watching myself, staring back through layer after layer of impossible glass, an infinite hall of reflections that had no right to exist in a single pane. Part 2. I spun around. Nothing. No one. Just the echoing emptiness of the hub. But the sense of eyes didn't fade. If anything, it dug deeper, like something was now watching through my own vision. I'd found my way into Station Zero, but standing there in that impossible space, surrounded by machines that shouldn't be real, one truth hit me harder than the cold. Getting in had been the easy part. Whatever answers lay deeper in that place weren't going to come cheap. I knew that. The air tasted like a warning, and somewhere down the sterile corridors, I heard it, a sound rolling through the emptiness. Laughter or screaming, I couldn't tell which, and somehow that was worse than knowing. The research hub sprawled out into 7 labs, each devoted to a different piece of Project Mykonos. I moved into the first. Advanced scanning rigs surrounded a raised platform, silent machines locked in their last pose. Workstations were littered with printouts, rows of figures, jagged graphs, incomprehensible numbers. Atmospheric readings, or at least they claimed to be, but the values were impossible. They were measuring air from a world that shouldn't exist. A low hum called to me from the next lab, faint but steady. Banks of servers lined the walls, still alive, their cooling fans spinning endlessly in the Antarctic cold. Screens glowed in the dark, spitting out streams of data that never stopped. One monitor stood apart, blinking a message over and over like a heartbeat. Signal detected. Origin unknown. Signal detected. Origin unknown. The timestamps reached back years. Whatever these machines had been listening for, they'd never stopped. By the third lab, the atmosphere changed. This was where the first sign of violence waited. A chair overturned, its steel frame twisted like soft metal. Dark stains on the walls, old but not forgotten. The security camera lay shattered on the floor, its glass spider-webbed with cracks. Its memory card was still inside. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. The video started normally. Routine experiment footage. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m., about a week before the evacuation. A lone researcher sat at his monitoring station, jotting notes. Then the frame began to warp. First I thought the video was corrupted, strange ripples distorting the edges, but no. The distortions weren't in the recording. They were in the room itself. The researcher saw them too. He began backing away from his station, his breathing ragged and quick, eyes locked on something off camera. This can't, he stammered, but the words cut off as the lights flickered. When the distortion stopped, he wasn't alone anymore. Something stood behind him, a shape almost human, but not enough to be mistaken for one. The recording cut off there, sudden and final. My heart hammered as I turned toward the 4th lab. Well, this one wasn't like the others. It sat sealed behind layers of thick glass plastered with warning signs. Even with Dr. Erasmus's card, the lock resisted me, demanding multiple levels of verification before it finally gave a reluctant click. Inside, the air pressed down on me, thicker, heavier. At the center loomed a containment chamber the size of a small building, its walls bristling with sensors and monitoring equipment. Empty now, but the logs stacked inside told the story. They had dragged something out of the ice, a relic buried longer than civilization itself, something that screamed signals no instrument had ever captured before. They thought it was alien technology. They were wrong. It wasn't technology. It was alive. It had been waiting. Well, the logs spiraled into madness the deeper I read. Day 37. Specimen absorbs every form of radiation. No reflection, no scatter. Complete absorption. Impossible under any known physics. Day 42. Power fluctuations spiking. Staff reporting auditory hallucinations around the chamber. Additional shielding installed. Day 45. Night shift unaccounted for, 3 hours. Security footage shows them still at their posts, unmoving. They have no memory of the time gap. Medical evaluation pending. Day 48. It's growing. God help us. It's growing and we can't stop it. The final entry was scrawled in a trembling hand, almost unreadable. It showed us what reality is. What's out there in the dark between stars. We thought we were ready for contact. We thought we understood. We are nothing, less than nothing. And now it's awake. The 5th lab led me to the research director's private office, Dr. Erasmus's den. Her desk was a battlefield of scattered papers, star charts, and deep space photographs. One image stood out, though, circled and clawed at with frantic notes, a patch of sky where the stars were gone, swallowed. Her scribble spoke of a void that moves, of signals whispering from inside the dark. My flashlight swept the room and caught a seam where the wall shouldn't have been. A hidden door buried in the paneling. I pried it open and found a narrow chamber, a shrine to secrecy. One monitor, one recorder. The screen pulsed with a jagged waveform, and a message flickered beneath it. Playback ready. Warning. Class 5 mimetic hazard. Cognitive shielding required. Well, I should have left it alone. Every instinct screamed to back off. But I'd already crossed too many lines to turn back. My fingers trembled as I hit play. The sound that rose from the speakers wasn't a sound at all. It was a presence. It started as a low, vibrating hum, deep enough to rattle my bones, climbing higher until the edges of my vision blurred. Underneath the hum, faint as breath, were voices, thousands, overlapping, speaking languages no human throat could form. But it wasn't the voices that undid me. It was a silence between them, black gaps in the noise that reached into my head and tore at memories I'd never lived. In those spaces, visions flared, cities stretched across dimensions that defied geometry, beings slipping through time like we move through air. And behind it all, something vast, something patient, something older than our sun, waiting for this exact moment. The playback cut off, but the silence didn't. It lingered. It felt alive now, aware, like it was staring back at me. And then I understood. This wasn't a recording. It was a beacon. And I just turned it on. Well, the lights died fast, total black. The kind of dark that has weight, pressing down like wet stone. My flashlight sputtered as the shadows thickened, bending the beam, warping it. The darkness wasn't empty. It was pushing back. The backup generators rumbled to life, a low animal growl echoing through the halls. The emergency lights bled crimson across the walls, carving the darkness into jagged shapes that moved like they had intent. I could hear the facility waking up around me, systems stirring after their long sleep, machines humming like distant predators, screens flickering on one by one down the corridor. Every monitor showed the same line at first. Signal confirmed. Containment protocols initiated. But the text began to melt, letters twisting, reshaping into symbols that clawed at my vision. My eyes watered, trying to focus on them. And then the intercom crackled. Welcome back, Dr. Erasmus. Your presence has been expected. Shall we resume the protocol? But it wasn't the AI. The voice was wrong. It was too smooth, too wet, too alive. It spoke again, but now in layers. Voices on top of voices, thousands overlapping like a chorus of hunger. We have waited so long in the dark, so patient, so hungry. The temperature crashed. Frost bloomed on the metal walls. My breath came out in clouds, freezing into tiny crystals that hung in the air before drifting down like glass dust. The walls themselves began to throb, a slow pulse like hearing a heartbeat underwater. And then I saw them. Handprints blooming in the frost, each one bigger than any human hand, the fingers too long, the joints bending in just wrong directions. Well, I bolted. The corridors had changed, stretching, twisting, leading me past rooms that shouldn't exist. A storage closet yawned open onto an endless field of stars. A break room window looked out on a city of impossible architecture, spires twisting into a sky scrawling with eyes. I slammed the door shut, but the gaze followed me, a pressure at the back of my skull. By the time I stumbled into the main research hub, it wasn't the same place anymore. The particle detector at its center glowed, alive with power. Arcs of energy crawled across it in colors my mind tried and failed to name. The air rippled like heat above asphalt, but through those ripples I glimpsed movement, something vast shifting in the spaces between spaces. My skull throbbed. Memories that weren't mine bled into my head, filling me with visions I couldn't stop or understand. I saw it. The facility as it had been before everything fell apart. Scientists moving like ants under a burning sun, working frantically as their machines screamed about something coming from the void. Dr. Erasmus stood at the heart of it all, right in front of the containment chamber, tears freezing on her cheeks as the truth hit her like a blade. The thing they'd reached out to wasn't inside the chamber. The chamber was its door, and they'd built it exactly as it had been whispered to them in their dreams. The entity had waited, patient and ancient, throwing its signal across the black gulfs between stars, pulling humanity toward this one moment. Every breakthrough, every so-called discovery that led to Project Mykonos had been part of its design. We weren't explorers, just puppets building its gateway one piece at a time. A monitor beside me flickered with security feeds from across the facility. In one, I saw myself standing in the research hub. In another, I was still in Dr. Erasmus's hidden room. In a third, I watched myself watching the feeds. None of the versions matched. Some of me bled, some screamed, some twisted into things that weren't even human anymore. Reality was cracking around me, the entity peeling it open like rotten fabric, showing me every version of myself across every possible timeline. And in each one, his influence spread, reaching backward, changing little details, rewriting cause and effect. Had I really found those files by accident? Did Dr. Erasmus hand me the keycard? Or had it always been in my pocket? How many times had I stood here, convinced I was making the discovery for the first time? The facility's AI spoke again, but its voice was no longer synthetic. It was my own voice now, clear, cold, inescapable. The cycle continues. The door opens. It has before, it will again. Something moved behind me in the dark. I turned, flashlight trembling in my hand. Dr. Erasmus was standing there, but not the Dr. Erasmus I'd met in the cabin. It wasn't the Dr. Erasmus I'd met in the cabin at all. No, this was her from 20 years ago, her face smooth, unlined, but her eyes... Well, her eyes were old, impossibly old, packed with the cold light of stars. "I tried to warn us," she said, her voice carrying an echo that didn't belong in the room, a sound that bent and stretched with each word. "Every time I try, I do, but we never listen. We're too curious, too proud, and it knows that. It's known us since the first time we looked up at the sky and wondered what was staring back." She reached for me then, her hand passing straight through my shoulder like smoke through a cracked window. "There's only one way to end this," she whispered. "But the price is everything." The apparition began to unravel, her body turning translucent as the facility's lights pulsed in sync with the low, throbbing hum of the particle detector. Before she completely dissolved, though, she shoved something into my palm, a small device, rough and cold, shaped like a detonator. "The reactor," her fading voice hissed. "It was never built to power the station. It was built to collapse it, all of it, every version, every timeline. But you have to reach it, and it won't let you." Then she was gone, the form shredding like smoke in high wind. The walls around me began to darken, not with shadow, but with something thicker, heavier, a void pooling across the metal like spilled oil. From that blackness came shapes, things that might have been human once. They wore the faces of the staff, but they were so wrong, stretched too far, features warped and sliding like reflections in broken glass. I ran. The corridors twisted around me like guts, turning on themselves, rooms opening into other rooms that couldn't exist. The air stank of static and iron. Footsteps followed, always just behind and never syncing with my own. The entity was playing with me, showing me scraps of other timelines, other runs at this same nightmare, other failures. In one room I saw myself mid-scream, my body caught in the middle of becoming something not human, my skin stretched, bones bending in ways they were never meant to. In another I watched an endless loop of Dr. Erasmus's team making first contact with the entity. Each time the scene played out, tiny details shifted, different voices, different gestures, but the ending was always the same, the moment of horror when they realized that what they'd let through. The reactor level wasn't on any blueprint. The elevator didn't even acknowledge it existed, but I found a maintenance shaft hidden behind a rusted panel, a vertical scar dropping straight into the dark. The rungs beneath my hands burned and froze in turns, metal flickering between ice and fire as if physics itself was breaking apart around me. The chamber at the bottom was impossibly huge, far larger than the station should have been able to hold. At its center stood a column of light that made my eyes ache, not because it was bright, but because it folded inward on itself, eating its own glow like a black hole of illumination. Around it the air shimmered, reality bending and snapping like heat off scorched pavement. And I wasn't alone. Part 3. Standing before the reactor was me. Not a reflection, not some distorted copy. Me, exactly as I was, watching myself step into the room. We spoke at once, voices overlapping like a recording out of sync. This is where it ends. This is where it begins. The other me smiled then. The smile was wrong, too wide, too knowing. A predator's grin on my own face. We've played this scene over and over, it said, its voice woven over mine like a second skin, each time hoping for a different ending. But we already know the truth. We're not here to stop it. We're here to join it. Then it began to show itself, not as a shape, but in the gaps between seconds, a vast presence bleeding through the fractures of reality. I saw it for what it really was, a mind that lived in the emptiness between stars, patient beyond measure. It had watched us crawl out of the sea, shaping us with invisible hands, waiting for the moment when we'd be able to punch through the skin of our own dimension. Your kind dreams of the stars, the thing wearing my face hissed, but you never understood the darkness between them. We are that darkness. We are what waits in every shadow, in every unobserved moment. And now, after eons of patience, you've built us a door. The reactor's light pulsed like a dying heart, each flash tearing open another vision of reality. With every burst, I saw myself again and again, some already warped into grotesque, impossible shapes, others still clawing at hope, convinced they could fight this thing and win. The entity was feeding me an endless reel of outcomes, all the different ways this moment played out across infinite timelines, like a cruel god showing off its collection of endings. Even if you press that button, my double rasped, my voice but deeper, soaked in something that wasn't me. Even if you burn this timeline to ash, another version of you will choose differently. That's the beauty of infinity. Every path happens, every door opens. We don't lose because somewhere, somehow, we always win. The detonator weighed in my hand like a dying star. It wasn't chance that Dr. Erasmus had given it to me. She'd handed it to all of us, every me in every world, every one faced with the same impossible decision: destroy reality to preserve it, or give ourselves to the entity and become something that could no longer be called human. The walls of the facility weren't walls anymore. They'd gone translucent, like paper burning away to reveal the void outside. Beyond stretched an endless black ocean of eyes and tendrils, reaching, waiting. The air vibrated, humming with the entity's presence, and I felt my mind straining at the edges, threads of sanity pulling apart. Time fractured like glass around me, every shard showing a different now, different me, a different choice. The entity spoke through my double again, but now its voice had too many layers, harmonics that made my bones ache and my teeth buzz. "We can show you everything," it whispered. "The birth of stars, the death of time, all the answers you've burned your lives trying to find. Join us and every mystery unravels. Every secret is yours. We'll strip reality bare and let you touch its bones." Images came like a flood, cosmic visions drowning my thoughts. I saw myself transcending flesh and bone, becoming something unbound by matter, shaping reality like clay, bending the universe with a thought. Infinite power, infinite knowledge, infinite self. But then the visions cracked at the edges, and other scenes bled through the static. Dr. Erasmus in her cabin, eyes hollow as she whispered warnings into the dark. A maintenance worker's trembling hands as he poured coffee. The quiet terror in the eyes of people who weren't afraid of dying but of something far worse. They'd stood where I was standing now. They'd seen the visions, and they'd run. The entity tasted my hesitation, and the chamber swirled with whispers, my own voice fracturing into an infinite chorus. Some versions of me begged, desperate, pleading to accept its offer. Others screamed in tongues no human ear had ever heard, languages that might have belonged to dead stars. A few just sobbed, broken and hollow, minds splintered by the weight of eternity. "You're not like the rest," my duplicate murmured, its shape melting into liquid shadow, flowing like oil over glass. "Your predecessors lacked the strength to embrace what they were meant to become. But you're different. You came here to tear the truth out of the dark, no matter the cost. And we're offering you everything you've ever wanted." The reactor's light beat faster, jagged pulses splitting reality apart like glass under strain. Impossible geometry bloomed outward, spreading like cracks in the skin of the world. Through the breaks, I saw flashes of other Station Zeros, other versions of this place scattered across endless dimensions. In some, the entity had already devoured everything. In others, the fight still raged, but always, the same choice waited at the center like a loaded gun. My double stepped closer, its movements too smooth, too fluid to belong to anything human at all. "Think of what you'll gain," it whispered. "Knowledge beyond comprehension, power to sculpt reality itself. You'll be more than human, more than God. You'll be us." As it spoke, its form unraveled further, revealing slivers of the thing beneath. The air around it bent like heat haze, but sharper, tearing at the edges of my sight. Staring directly at it felt like knives behind my eyes, and in that moment, clarity struck me like a hammer blow. This was what Dr. Erasmus had learned in the dark. This is what had driven her into isolation. The entity didn't want to gift us transcendence. It wanted to devour us. Every consciousness it swallowed fed its hunger, swelling its power. This wasn't evolution. It was extinction dressed up as ascension. "No," I said, my voice steady even as terror scraped its claws down my spine. "This isn't destiny. This isn't transcendence. It's hunger. You feed on minds. Every thought, every soul you take becomes just another echo in your endless appetite. My duplicate smile stretched wider, skin splitting, face folding inward to reveal the void behind it. Ah, such a clever mind, it hissed. Yes, we feed. Yes, we consume. But isn't that the truth of all life? To grow, to learn, to absorb. Join us freely and your consciousness will remain intact inside our collective. Resist and we'll take you anyway, piece by shattered piece. The chamber shook as reality warped under its power. The walls melted into nothing, leaving us suspended in a place between places, a bleeding space between dimensions. Tentacles of living darkness slithered toward me, each one tipped with an eye. My own eyes, staring back at me from the black. In that instant, everything clicked. The full weight of Dr. Erasmus's plan hit me like a blade through the ribs. The reactor wasn't just a bomb for the facility. It was a weapon designed to tear the entity out of every reality it had ever infected, a cascading annihilation stretching across infinite timelines. A cosmic reset button, burning away every version of Station Zero, every scientist, soldier, and stray soul who'd ever brushed against what lurked inside it. But the price wasn't just my death. It was obliteration. No afterimage, no echo. Kirk Schneider erased from existence. Every version of me in every timeline gone. Memories rewritten, lives reshaped to fill the void where I'd been. Friends would never have met me. My life would become an empty space they'd walk around without ever realizing something was missing. Well, the entity knew my thoughts. I felt it crawling through them, its voice now a chorus of stolen lives, thousands layered on top of each other. Such a waste, it hissed, the sound like glass shattering in my skull. All that knowledge, all those memories reduced to nothing. For what? To preserve a reality you'll never even see again? I stared at the detonator in my hand, then up at the thing wearing my face. Its expression flickered between mockery and hunger. Sometimes, I said quietly, the only way to win is to lose everything. My thumb dropped onto the trigger before it could stop me. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then reality screamed. The reactor's light detonated outward, not just here, but everywhere, blinding across timelines. I watched the cascade rip through existence like shockwaves through black water. Every ripple erased another Station Zero, another version of me, another place where the entity had carved its nest. The duplicate's face twisted, its human mask melting away to reveal what it really was, something vast and formless, its true shape a nightmare of infinite edges. "Oh, you fool!" it roared, 1,000 voices tearing at once. "You're not just killing yourself. You're unmaking yourself, everything you are, everything you could have been." "I know," I said, my voice flat, almost calm, as the edges of reality folded in around us. "That's the price." It struck at me with tendrils of pure darkness, but they disintegrated as the reactor's energy chewed them apart. For the first time I felt it. The entity's fear. This ancient, patient thing, its plan stretched over eons, was watching them unravel in a single catastrophic moment. Time split and folded back on itself. Scenes from my life flickered in reverse. My arrival at the facility, meeting Dr. Erasmus, every step that had led me to this point, unwinding like a tape burning away in the projector. But the world around me was warping, rewriting itself as the timelines tore apart. In some splintered realities, I never found the documents about Station Zero. In others, I'd never been born. The entity flailed, making one last desperate leap to escape, trying to slip into timelines beyond the reactor's reach. But Dr. Erasmus had been meticulous. The cascade chased it everywhere, burning its fingerprints off existence, hunting its influence through every dimension like wildfire through dry grass. "Even if you succeed," it hissed, its form disintegrating into strands of living void. There will be others, other entities, other stations, other humans arrogant enough to claw at truths beyond their grasp. You cannot stop curiosity. You cannot stop hunger. Well, maybe not, I said, feeling my own self unraveling, every nerve dissolving into static. But we can fight it, every time in every reality. And that's what makes us human. The chamber exploded in blinding light as the reactor hit critical mass. And in that final moment, before everything folded into nothing, I saw it all. Every choice, every path, every possible version of what had led us here. I saw Dr. Erasmus at her desk, designing the reactor with trembling hands, embedding it in the ability to reach across timelines. I saw her run the simulations again and again, knowing exactly what it would cost. Saw her hiding her notes where I'd find them, betting that some version of me, one version, would make the right call. And then I saw something else, something she'd buried deep in the reactor's heart. A hidden failsafe, a final gift. As the world dissolved, reality buckling and folding like molten steel, I felt it wrap around me, a small protected fragment of space-time. Not enough to save anyone. Not enough to preserve a life, but enough to hold a memory, enough to leave a warning, a message in a bottle hurled into the black sea of existence. The entity screamed as it was unmade, its consciousness scattering across dimensions that no longer existed, its hunger smothered in the collapse. The facility came apart piece by piece, dissolving into nothing, taking Project Mykonos, Station Zero, and every soul who had ever known their names with it. I felt my own consciousness unravel, my thoughts scattering like ash in a storm. Memories tore loose, shredded and carried off into the void. Yet something held. A sliver, a fragment of awareness locked inside Dr. Erasmus's temporal sanctuary. Just enough to cling to the reason we chose this end. Just enough to leave behind a warning. The light devoured everything. Time rewrote itself, history bent into new channels, filling over the wounds where we'd been. And in the void beyond the stars, something shifted. Not the entity we'd destroyed. Others. Always others. Watching, waiting, starving. They would try again. They always do. But this time, there would be a scar left behind, a warning etched into the one place their reach could not corrupt, the dreams of those wide enough to fear the dark. In a cabin high in the Cascades, a woman wakes from a nightmare she cannot recall. Her research papers lie scattered around her, pages filled with equations and theories about signals from the deep. She doesn't know why her hands tremble as she gathers them, why a sudden certainty grips her. The certainty that they must burn. In a NASA facility, a researcher pauses. Her finger hovers above the console, ready to run a new scan that would push deeper into the black than any human eye has ever reached. For reasons she cannot explain, she powers the system down instead. And in the Antarctic wastes, the ice covers itself once more. The wind screams across endless white, untouched and unbroken. No station, no ruins, no trace that we had ever existed. But in the dark between stars, the hunger remains. In the dreams of those who dare to look up, a whisper threads through the silence. Some doors are not meant to open. Some truths are better left buried. Sometimes the greatest victory lies not in the conquest, but in walking away. I know this because I am that whisper. I'm what remains of Kirk Schneider, of Station Zero, of every choice made and unmade. I'm a shard of memory trapped in the amber of collapsed time, a ghost etched into the cracks of reality. And if those words reach you, if some trace of my story has bled through the unraveling of worlds, then remember this. They are still out there, still watching, still hungry. Their patience stretches beyond the span of stars. So look up if you must, wonder if you dare, But if the dark begins to whisper back, if you feel eyes older than suns pressing against your thoughts, remember Station Zero. Remember what it cost. And whatever you do, don't answer. Ooh, a lot of perspective there. Too much perspective, as Spinal Tap might say. Anyway, yeah, what do you think about that one? Very interesting things to ponder. What causes you to not do something, to make a different choice just because it feels like you shouldn't? Anyway, too much philosophy for a Sunday evening, I think. Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say about that brilliant Augustus Cordoba story? And I would, as always, join in the conversation below the line. Well, that is Sunday evening. I'll be back again very soon, probably tomorrow night. Till then, my dear friends, have a lovely weekend, and see you again soon, yeah? Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.